What's up, everyone? Bryce Koon here, Swarm Talk, as we rewind Georgia Tech's 46-42 win over North Carolina. Man, thanks so much for tuning in. Ralph Leary in the background. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Swarm Talk, brought to you here on the Crowded Booth, as we get ready to rock and roll with a show here tonight that, if we're just going to be honest with ourselves, we didn't expect to be having. And Jones, we see there first in there. John Burns, though, wasn't actually the first. Everybody's got $100. And John Burns knows that he can donate it. We're going to rock and we're going to walk and talk here tonight about a couple of things that stood out from this team. And if you tuned in last night, we appreciate you, as this, conversation was more geared towards your reaction. Went back and rewatched the game today. But man, this is absolutely a game where it's just crazy. Alex is not first anyways. Hey, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and then head over to wherever you may listen to your podcast, whether that's Apple Podcast or Spotify. Even if you're listening after the fact, or if you've already watched this live, help us over there. We need some assistance over there on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'd appreciate it. We just appreciate it. It'd be very nice. It helps Ralph eat, and that's what we need. Ralph helps Ralph to, get food, and that's what it is. That's isn't that right, Ralph?
Stop, get me out of here.
No, but hey, appreciate it. We're going to talk Georgia Tech here. It's going to be very, very interesting show tonight. We're going to get your comments in, but I want to start off with this. And a lot of times when blame happens, a lot of times when credit is due, a lot of times when certain things are, Mr. 175 a K Day over there in the chat, this is a situation where, if we're just going to be rolling with ourselves here, when we're going to be honest with ourselves here, a lot of folks weren't too high on Haynes King after the performance he had against Boston College. And I think there was some warranted concern with the last three games and how he had performed. That being said, Haynes King may have the it factor. I say this in the sense of King, although the performance was obviously topsy-turvy before the, game this past weekend, the play calling, but the will to win, the will to bounce back. This team came back down from 4 deficits to win this football game. And when you have a situation like that, you've got to have a quarterback that can just dial it in, doesn't get rattled when the defense doesn't make a stop. You got to have his faith in his guys around him. We're going to talk about some of the weapons that showed out in this performance. But I think one of the biggest things that we saw in this was that the it factor, the idea that you can go and win a football game with this guy that's going to battle towards the end. It's something that Brent Key talks so much about. And I think when you looked at, and we talked about this kind of in that quarterback battle episode that we did back in July, when Chris Winkie and Buster Faulkner were where they were before at their respective schools and programs, Haynes King was a guy that they each individually recruited. So they knew this about him, bringing him in. It fit up with kind of the identity of what Brent Key wants out of this team. And so I have to be honest with you guys, I was very, very much impressed with the fight, the grit, the determination that Haynes King put on display on Saturday night. It would have been really easy, and we've seen it with a lot of other quarterbacks, not just at Georgia Tech, but in general. We've seen it with different, quarterbacks, where when things get tough, you have some early success, then things start to get a little tough. And then what happens? Well, you start to kind of turn around and say, okay, here's the breaking point. Here's where things could go either way. That being said, Haynes King answered the call. He answered the bell. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, he had went 23 of 30, 287 yards, 90 yards on the ground, 4 tutties, and an interception. Are there things still to work on? Am I saying the it factor in the terms of being a number 1 overall pick? No, but I'm talking about the mental fortitude that a quarterback needs to have. I think that it's going to I think that it's going to be very interesting to see what happens over the course of the rest of the season with what King is able to do, with what they're able to bring in around him once again, because this team with him at the helm has the chance to do some special things. They're already doing some special things offensively, but I love the gumption. I love the ability to mentally be able to compartmentalize drives. It's something that very few good quarterbacks at the college level have. And I think that we can say Georgia Tech has one of the good college quarterbacks. Like, I think that is something that we can say. Are there inconsistencies? Are there certain things? Yes. But what we saw on Saturday night, and that you hope continues, and it's all part of tonight's theme of, is this team trending the right way, is the mental capability to not succumb back to past habits. Did he do that over the past 3 games? Yes, he did. Were there too many turnovers? Yes, there were. But instead of letting the last 3 weeks define him, he turned around and was able to turn things around, not only for himself, but for this team. Brent Key said something that stood out to me after that game against Boston College. He said, look, they are going to have to play around this guy. They're going to have to support him because he's a good player, but you can't let him go out there and do it by himself. Very few quarterbacks can do that. A lot of, and if we just want to put it in perspective here, no comparison, the idea that a quarterback is solely responsible for is it the most important position? Probably. Outside of left tackle, maybe cornerback and defensive end, one of the most toughest positions to play. But with King in the picture here, I think that we see when this team plays around him, they can do a lot of special things. When this group doesn't play around him, as in any situation, the team's not going to have a lot of success. You have to help your quarterback out. And when I was saying earlier is, you're seeing an example of that, of a lot of people who think the number one pick. And let's just take an example. What you saw last night out of Drake May, the kid's a pro prospect. But when his team doesn't help him out, it's hard to win. Caleb Williams at USC, same situation. Talent's off the charts, all these different things. But when your team doesn't help him out. So am I comparing USC and Georgia Tech? Am I comparing Caleb Williams and Haynes King? No, we're not doing that. But what we are sitting here and saying tonight is that Georgia Tech helped Haynes King out. King's got the it factor, I think, mentally to overcome the hurdles. He says the right things. I think he thinks the right things. And we're seeing, too, why I think that he was named the starter. If this battle was as close as I was led to believe, if this is, battle was as close to, I think in the fall, if this is as close as I was led to believe and a lot of other people, now we're seeing what might have given him the edge as a veteran player. Might have. Ralph, let's take it to the next topic here, because we talk about helping Haynes King out. The offensive weapons showed out. Guys, we go back to this. I mean, and I mentioned this. Eric Singleton Jr., I talked about this on Thursday. This kid has to be on the field. He is one of the many, I think, honestly, few engines that helps run this offense. This is a multi-engine machine we got going on here. Very complex, a lot of moving parts of what Buster Faulkner wants to do. Getting Eric Singleton Jr. back was massive. 8 catches, 117 yards, 9 targets. You might say, well, he only had 9 targets. But let's talk about it here. The threat of what Eric Singleton Jr. is on the field for this team, it changes your defense completely if you're Gene Chizik in North Carolina, if you're Virginia coming up, this weekend. I think there's a lot of things here that, you kind of see with what this group has. Is this is a kid, man, that he is making a case, and we're going to have to go back and look at it. Dr. Bob, if you're watching tonight, you want to run the stats and info, I'd like to see where this kid ranks, in the terms of freshman wide receiver production. And while the numbers, because he missed a couple games, might be skewed a little bit, I should say. When we talk about the importance of one player to the offense, and yes, this is a team game, what he's able to do for this offense and help other guys out. Because is Malik Rutherford a good football player? Yeah, he's a good football player. His day becomes a lot easier when Eric Singleton Jr. is on the other side. We saw Brett Seither, absolutely. And Jonesy just said right there, Jonesy's following the script. He got the Crowded Booth script tonight. Brett Seither has got to be a part of this offense going forward. The kid's got 5 catches, 4 of them for touchdowns. That's pretty freaking good. Get him in the red zone. We want to see more of it. Chase Lane, not really a factor in this one. Avery Boyd, just 1 catch, 8 yards, but what his potential, him being on this roster, him being in that, if you're running a 4 wide receiver, set, him being a part of that, once again, takes eyes away from other people. Christian Leary, 2 catches, 21 yards, but he had the screen pass. This is the best. And I said this, and there were people that cover Georgia Tech and that say things about Georgia Tech that said, oh, we don't know. We don't know about this wide receiver room. Guys, there's talent there. Like let's give a hand clap to Josh Crawford. Give a hand clap to a lot of these coaches, a lot of the support staff, a lot of the recruiting staff, guys like, Aaron Joe, guys like Kenyatta Watson, guys elsewhere that made this happen, helped bring in difference makers in the portal. Dominic Blaylock has helped you out in certain instances. And then also brought in guys, out of the high school ranks. This is a very, very talented wide receiver room that I think has the chance to even get better, and it's going to be a ton of fun to watch. In years past, we've seen they might have one option or they might have two. It legitimately feels like that you probably have 5 or 6 guys that can contribute for you at a high level, and I love that because, one, it tells you that you're building depth, and that's part of what we had to see out of this team. So absolutely love that. Continuing on with the offensive weapons here that continue to show out. Dante Smith. Wow. Dante Smith, 22 carries, 178 yards. One of the final, and if not the final, Paul Johnson recruit. Dante Smith shows up on a night where he averages 8.1 yards per carry, on a night to honor Paul Johnson, and this guy just runs the football. I've been saying this for a couple of weeks, and I think the question, should be asked, and Brent Key answered in so many words of saying like it's been an internal decision. Well, I hope internally it's figured out. Like I hope that the decision of whatever the reason, because it wasn't injury and it wasn't a violation of rules of why Dante Smith couldn't play, whatever that reason, you better hope it's figured out, because the combination of Dante Smith, Jamal Haynes, and Haynes King in this running game has to be, we saw just in a microcosm of one game, one of the better rushing attacks in the ACC of what they were able to do. I mean, you compile 348 yards, essentially. Cooley had 8 yards, so give me 340 between 3 guys. That's really, really good. Like, that's super, super good. Dante Smith's got to be a part of this offense. He's another engine that runs. I will say this about Dante. I think in what you have in Dante Smith is you have a guy that on paper in his career has never been the most talented back in this room. He's never been the big name guy. He's not going to get the billboards, not necessarily going to get the NIL money. When you think about the guys over the past 4 to 5 seasons that have, donned the Georgia Tech uniform, Dante Smith hasn't really been the focal point, but he's always been around. He's always been, kind of doing some different things with what, off of other guys, whether it was a Jordan Mason, whether it was a Jahmyr Gibbs. And now you're seeing in a game where they needed to run the football. We talked about that. They could not go back and pass the ball 40, 50 times and win this football game, where they needed to have balanced offense and they needed to keep North Carolina on their toes. Like, folks, Dante Smith answered the call and more. He runs physical. He runs downhill. He's a guy that, isn't afraid of contact. And it's not to say that other guys are, but I think his running style and Jamal Haynes' running style complement each other so well in this offense. Haynes feels like a guy that can, be an interior run guy, but he's a guy that definitely can bounce it out. Where you get in between the tackles with a guy like Dante Smith, you create some holes for him, and he's able to really, really do a good job. I really like that. Hawaii's first year, I'm not even going to, Mr. Ashlock, Pofele Ashlock leads the country in yards as a freshman. Okay, fair enough. So that was back to the Eric Singleton Jr. comment. Where does he rank? So, Jamal Haynes, 14 carries, 80 yards. Dante, 22 for 178. Haynes King, 8 for 90. What does this do for the running back room or the rushing game in general? Well, one, it takes the pressure off of Haynes King as a runner. Can he use his legs? Should he use his legs? Yeah, he should. And I think that he did a really good job of that in this game, picking and choosing his spots. I think that that's where you want Haynes King too. You want him in a situation where he can pick and choose his spots to be able to pick up a first down, to be able to pick up, 6-7 yards to set up for a 3rd and short. You don't want, I don't think outside of maybe 3 or 4 players in the entire game of football, I don't think that you necessarily want, your quarterback leading the team in rushing. I can tell from folks from down here in Baton Rouge, they don't want Jaden Daniels leading the team in rushing. You want him to be able to focus more on passing the ball. Haynes King still finished with 90 yards, but he threw for 287, and he only had 7 incompletions. You could say around 2 to 3 drops in between that. That being said, this was about as a complete offensive performance that I've seen. And I want to say this as well. It doesn't matter the opponent. North Carolina's defense isn't great. North Carolina's defense is regressing very quickly, in the past 2 weeks. 348 yards on the ground against anybody is really good. And it shows that this offensive line, maybe they got a little ticked off because I think that they were a little frustrated with their play against Boston College, getting bullied around. Boston College had big guys up front. And North Carolina, while up until the Virginia game, had looked, I would say, about average. We looked at the numbers. I think they were in the 70s range, 60s range. So they're about an average defense. And you were able to put up 348 on the ground. Your offensive line was able to create, massive running lanes, great running lanes for this group. And so love what this offense did. I love what this offense was able to do. I think altogether, when you see what this offense was able to do in the sense of having a balanced attack, getting weapons back, Buster Faulkner being able to dial things up the way he wanted, this might have been, especially in that second half, some of the best play calling and game management that I've seen out of Faulkner during his time at Tech. I liked that. I got a text from someone who's close to the program, and he and I are close as well. And he said, "Where's this play calling been?" I think that second half, if that's what you can build off of, that's going to be huge. It's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. If you can find somewhere in the middle, that's huge. Last comment on the offense here. We talked about the weapons showing out. I want to once again hit on the offensive line. They got to get better and more consistent, obviously, in some pass pro and some different things. But it was very obvious that North Carolina was tired, but you still have to execute. Georgia Tech did a fantastic job of that in this game. Was really, really impressed with their ability to recognize the weakness and also execute just in general. Hey, you're tired. Now we're going to lean on you, and we are just going to run the ball until you are begging to get to the sideline. Tech did a really, really good job of that. Really, really good job of that. Let's flip over to the next topic conversation, because I think that this is something I wanted to talk about, because this defense, I want to remind us, everything that great that happened offensively. Defensively, you were able to come up with plays when you needed them. Shout out. That's a big part of playing defense in the college game, being able to make plays when necessary. But I'm going to continue to point to a consistent statistic that continues to worry me and is not sustainable for good defensive play. LaMiles Brooks led the team in 9 tackles. Clayton Powell-Lee led the tie for the team lead 9 tackles. Jalen King, 7 tackles. Kyle Eford, 6 tackles. Daquan Dowse, 6 tackles. Spider Sims, 4. Amari Harvey, 4. Horace Lockett, 4. KJ Wallace, 3. Out of guys that had 3 tackles or more, 7 of them, 6 of them were in the secondary. Why is that? You have a secondary that is battered. They're bruised. Folks, we just named one linebacker, and it's Kyle Eford. I think that if we're going to be honest with ourselves here, the linebacker play is really bad. I've said it multiple times, no matter how much people try to paint it, no matter how much people try to look at it through the gold, navy, gold and white glasses, or whatever you want to say, the gold tinted glasses. This is a linebacking core that does not have a consistent 2 to throw out there. They don't have, what they need to make this defense more complete. It has put an absolute immense amount of pressure on the safeties, on the cornerbacks, and I think it's created bad habits. I think we see guys freelance. We see guys over pursue because mentally, I don't think that they trust what's happening in front of them. They're not going to say it, as they shouldn't publicly, but probably in the heads of some of the secondary members, it's got to be that these guys in front of us has not hasn't performed. And look, you can go down the list of names, and I don't think it's picking on anybody to necessarily say, well, first off, I want to say this. We're not ever going to make anything personal on this show, but kids get paid now, so I think it does give us the right way to be able to talk about specific players not playing well. In the NFL we do that, but in the college we tended not to do that. So we're not getting personal here with anything because I think all of these guys are great people. But guys like Braylon Oliver, Trinius Tatum, Paul Moala, like there's a lot of passiveness, in that group. Andre White has one tackle. I mean, Andre White had the same. Listen to this, and I need to go back and look at the snap counts brought to you our exclusive partner, PFF. Andre White had the same amount of tackles as Eric Singleton Jr. Eric Singleton Jr. is a wide receiver. Going to be very, very interesting. I do think that Kyle Effort's a guy that is going to grow and learn. He hasn't played a lot, played some special teams last year. But this is a guy that I think is watched and learned. He is a high effort guy. He is a guy that understands the physical downhill nature that you have to play with and you have to play like to be able to do certain things. And look, sometimes if I'm a coach or if I'm a person watching, it's easier to say, you know what, the kid's playing 110%. If we hone some of the mental things and some of the schematic things with him, can turn out to be a pretty nice little linebacker. Turn out to be a nice little ACC player for us. But when you have guys that are just not shooting gaps, are tentative on what they want to do, it's one, they're not trusting their eyes, they're not trusting the directions given to them. And I think we're all just kind of tired of sitting in a press conference and hearing about, we didn't give enough effort. Once again, we're not trying to single anybody out in this, but I think it's fairly obvious of what this linebacker room hasn't been able to do. They just haven't really been really, really great, really, really great in that sense. Let's, Ralph, I'm going to pull this comment up just because I want to speak on this. You talk about recruiting. Taj Butler out of New Orleans, about an hour and a half away from me down here. I will say this. Spoke to some folks close to Taj Butler. We'll see, obviously, what happens with this. But Butler was on campus at LSU a couple weeks ago for the Auburn game. Plans to be back on campus, hoping to get that LSU offer on November the 11th against Florida. He is going to be back in Atlanta for a clean old-fashioned hate at the end of the season. But talking with some people close to the situation, and once again, down here in Louisiana, if you're a kid that grows up here and you get that LSU offer, it's something that's really, really hard to turn down. I think there's still a runway for that to happen. I'm not promising anything, but what I do think is that this is a group that, they know they're in a dogfight to get Butler to commit and sign that or he's already committed, but really and truthfully to sign that piece of paper and end up in Atlanta. But defensively, I mean, I think this sums it up, and Ralph's got the graphic down there. The defense is what it is. I mean, I don't think that there's necessarily any reason for us to get on every single week and rant and rave about it. I think that there's an obvious need to go get a defensive coordinator to rehaul some of the defensive staff, the philosophy of what they're doing. It's something that I maybe wish would have happened. We can say now, in hindsight, it's really easy to say in hindsight that this is a group that we wish would have done some things. I also think, too, and I said this last week, that we were probably fooled into a weak offensive line that has gotten better in the reports of spring practice and spring games about a defense that was swarming around and playing really good football. I think that it was kind of week on week at times. I think the offensive line's gotten better, still has a ways to go. I will tell you that, because Haynes King had to dance around a lot in the pocket in the first half. But I think that, this defensive line, and here's what I'll tell you. Because I think a lot of times when I talk to the fans on Discord or talk to the fans on social media, and we sit here and talk about the defense, like, well, yeah, we have this guy and we've got that guy. Here's the difference. And I don't blame Georgia Tech fans. What I do say, in the sense, you're just not aware of it. Because if you're not watching college football necessarily as a whole, you don't understand that average to good defenses, they've got guys that you can sit there and you can say, okay, here, this guy's a playmaker, or we've got two or three guys. I just don't know when the last time we've been able to say that Georgia Tech has we've got like 3 or 4 guys in the defensive line they're going to rotate in and out that are really good. Or we've got 2 or 3 linebackers that we can rotate really good. Or we've got that. We talked a little bit about that, in the preseason about the secondary, but it just goes to show the lack of depth. And Key has been very upfront about this, about the inability to, you're kind of playing who you're playing. There's no one else walking through that door right now for this team. And so the defense is what it is. I think they've got to do a really, really good job, hitting the portal. I would say that hitting the portal in the high school ranks in that matter. What I will say to this is what's going to happen with the portal sometimes. Sometimes you're going to hit, sometimes you're going to miss. Georgia Tech missed, we think. Obviously, these kids aren't getting a lot of playing time. A guy like Andre White, we don't know what the deal with that is. But you missed on some of these guys in the portal, and that's just what it is. And so now you got to go back to the drawing board. You got to up your evaluation process. You've got to up your, scouting process. You've got to turn around, and now you've got to say to yourself, let's bring this in. Let's bring that in. Or here's a better catch for us. Or this guy's got better upside that folks aren't seeing. All of that to say is, I just think that defensively, it is what it is. I'm not going to come on this show for the next 4 weeks and belabor it. It's not a very good defense. They're going to have to rely on big plays, and that's just who they are at this point. But the question now remains, how can you get away with it? You got to find – Kyle Efford doesn't need to leave the field. He just doesn't need to leave the field. I mean, it's just – he doesn't need to. 44's got to stay on the field for this team. Then you can figure out what you're going to put beside him. But you've got to alleviate some of the stress, some of the pain that this group has in the secondary, because they're getting battered and bruised because they're having to come up and make plays in the run game, which, yes, guys in the secondary, especially safety position, should be able to play against the run. But is it the end-all, be-all? Should they always be a one-on-one matchup? No. And too often – we're getting kicked out, blocked, and we're just, slow to a hole, or we're just kind of taking ourselves out of the play at the linebacker position to really, really just to really be effective. And I think that's where this group is. So, Ralph, let's go to the final segment here. Before we do, Section 103, make sure they got a great deal, 17% off, because they beat number 17 ranked North Carolina. You need to check it out over there at section103.com. They got some great merch, including the hoodie, the Ramblin' Wreck hoodie I was wearing last night. That goes for all the merch that is not on sale. Section 103, fantastic stuff. If you don't get it in and you're like, hey, I'm watching or listening after the fact on the podcast, this is what you can do. You can go there, use code CrowdedBooth for 10% off your order. Fantastic partnership we have, them presenting sponsor of our Georgia Tech show, and I think it's something we're really, really excited about. All right, Ralph, let's move to the fourth and final topic here, and it brings us to this. The title of the video, because we don't do clickbait. Is Georgia Tech on the right track here? And I think it's one or two ways to really be looking at this. I know that we've got some people who think people are negative Nancy's. We got people who think are, way too positive, and I think it's just somewhere in between. Can you give up? I'll say this. Can you give up 577 yards, 9 for 15 on third downs, give up an average of 8 yards per play, 5.7 per rush, and let a team go 5 for 5 against you in the red zone and win a lot of games? No, you can't. Is it exciting to win a game like that? Sure is. It sure is. And I think this fan base should be excited to win a game like that. To answer the question, is Georgia Tech on the right track? This team has been unable to compartmentalize winning and losing. You probably can make the argument that they have in a reverse psychology type of way because they've alternated all season. But to be able to compartmentalize a win, ignore it, and move on to the next game and treat it like that last week never happened. I guess they were able to do that this past weekend technically, so maybe I'm just going reverse psychology here on myself. But what I would like to say to this is we're going to figure out a lot when you head up to Charlottesville. You play a Virginia team that is much better than what their record indicates that they are. And I think altogether here we're going to see a lot of things that we need to keep an eye on, that we, just need to understand about this group going forward. Is what is the mental focus of these guys up in Charlottesville? What is the, attention to detail? Is there a lack of other than, I don't know how to say it other than say oomph kind of to it, but is there a lack of aggressiveness? I mean, I don't expect necessarily a ton of aggressiveness from this linebacking core at this point, but is there a lack of aggressiveness when it comes to, you know, when it just comes to honestly and ultimately here, when you're looking at how this team responds? Like, do they go into this game? What is a, not a gonna, I don't expect a big crowd. It's on the CW channel. It doesn't have the same pizzazz as ACC network being there and under the lights and flashing lights. Can they carry that? Can they get themselves up? Or they have to rely on the crowd and to get the morale up and stuff like that? So we're going to learn a lot about this team, I think, if we're on the right track. I don't think that necessarily beating Georgia means you're on the right track, or losing to Georgia means you're on the right track. I don't know if beating Clemson or losing to Clemson means that you're on the right or wrong track. What I do think means you're on the right or wrong track is the mentality and the morale, the focus, the mental fortitude, like I talked about, that it factor that I think Haynes King has. I think that's going to have to come into play this week. You're going to have to see an attention detail and aggressiveness, because knowing what is at stake here, 4 games left, you need 2 more wins. Can you go out there? Can you execute at a high level? Can you perform? But can you treat it where we're not going to ride this emotional roller coaster? We're going to be able to understand how to stabilize the heartbeat, to be able to calm ourselves down and play a football game. Because look, Virginia's not going to care what you did last week when you take the field on Saturday. We're going to preview that on Thursday night. They're not going to care about it, as neither should Georgia Tech. That's great. That's fine. 24-hour rule. But while because fans are meant to enjoy this win for years on. That's what a fan's job is, to remember where you were, to, remember what you were doing if you were in the middle of the, field storming, all of those things. What you can't turn around and do is, if you're a player, you can't turn around and be that fan. It can always be something that you put in your pocket and you can tell your kids when you get older. It can't be a week later. Virginia's not going to care. They are much better than that record indicates. I'd love to see that this team goes out there and dominates them, but we're going to have to see. I think it's going to be a very big test of the mental fortitude, the willpower of this team to put this amazing, great, awesome win behind them and take a step in the right direction. So is Georgia Tech on the right track? There's a lot of reasons why I think you could say they could be, but I think we have to wait until after Saturday to really say, okay, if they go in there and they win the game like they beat Wake Forest by double-digit points, which I think they are capable of doing. I believe that Virginia right now opened up as a 1 or 1.5 point favorite. This is essentially a pick'em game. If you can go in there and take care of business, I think you're on the right track, because I do think you're the better team on paper, but we're going to have to see. And I think that's what Vegas is telling you too. We don't know with this Georgia Tech team. You don't know, because literally on a week-to-week basis, it is different each and every single week. But I'm excited to see what they can do, because I think that this team proved what they could be on Saturday night. They've got to find a way to channel that energy, or we're going to be in the exact same situation on Sunday night talking about, man, you let the momentum get away. You've got to figure out how to stack the momentum and stack the wins, because it's going to be very interesting to see where it rolls. I think Ralph's got a couple comments started. We're going to get to it here. You can get to a couple. Ralph will go. Share as linebackers coach. I wonder if he has too much on his plate trying to play call defense and linebackers. Valid question. It'd be very interesting to see if that is an issue. What about Ashton Woods out of Walton High, local 4-star linebacker recruit who is committed to UNC? Heard we were still pursuing them. Yeah, they're definitely still in on them. And I think that's something where Dr. Bob, look, you're always going to have a chance. Ralph, take that comment down, and we're going to be done for the night after I get done saying this right here. Something I think is 47 people watching, only 10 likes. Smash the like button. Yeah, you need to. In on the action. We're having a fun night here on a Sunday night. It's going to be a ton of fun. That being said, I really do like where this team is heading. I think they have a good opportunity to do some really, really good things. They're going to have to find an ability to really just maintain the heart level. The winning, and I joked with it on a folks show last night. You can't do this week in and week out. You can't. There you go, Ralph. You can't. You got to find a way to win the games in a confident manner. So we're going to see if they can do just that. But I do think this is something where this team's going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to see if they can be consistent up in Charlottesville this weekend. We're going to end it right here with my man John Burns. He says winning ain't free. Send a check, even if it's only $100. We need 40,000 fans sending a check every single quarter. Wow. John Burns, Johnny Boy, there sending the check. Winning ain't free. We might have to make some shirts like that. Dr. Bob's going to be sending him that check starting next summer. There we go, Dr. Bob. Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, which we appreciate you have, best Georgia Tech show on the internet, you should check us out. Whether, whatever you want to do, talk college football, we're going to be doing that tomorrow night, recapping week 9. Me and the boys are going to be talking. It was upset weekend because I know a lot of fans were happy in Atlanta, but a lot of fans were happy over in Rock Chalk Jayhawk Town too, over there in Kansas, as they got the big win over Oklahoma. Upset city. College football is a ton of fun, folks. We only got a couple more weeks. The last month of the regular season is upon us. My name is Bryce Koon. Thanks so much for tuning in. Ralph Leary in the background. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to hit us up at thecrowdedbooth.com. Merch link down below. Join the Discord. Great conversation we have each and every single day. We learned a lot about folks, including those who do like payday bars. I forgive you. You can still be a part of the community, but I will look at you differently. My name is Bryce Koon. We'll catch you next time here on The Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.